Hello everyone, today I'm going to be taking a look at the new starter set for the multi-award winning Moonstone from Goblin King Games, and it's a life and death struggle. Okay, so the new starter set for Moonstone, the multi-award winning Moonstone, is called Life and Death Struggle, and it contains 4 miniatures for each faction. So on one side we have the Jackalope plus the Hunting Horns party. The other side we have Angerboda plus the Never-Ending Nights sets. So unlike the previous starter set, all of these are available separately. The original one had a figure you couldn't get anywhere else in it, which was a bit of a pain if you just needed that figure. So they've decided to go for a more traditional starter set, which I appreciate. It also contains everything you need to play the game. So if I pop this out, these I imagine are the miniatures. We'll come back to those in a second. We have the Moonstone card deck. We have the cards for the individual characters, because everyone's a character in Moonstone. All your bases. Set of dice, which we'll also come back to. Energy counters and a little measuring widget. This is really cool. I like that. Double-sided for the Moonstone. Should say multi-award winning, but maybe next time. Good heavy cardstock. I'll say that. That looks like possibly 3mm cardstock. In fact, I'll just do that. And it is 3mm cardstock. So 3mm cardstock with a satin finish. And then UV print on that for the Moonstone. It's, yeah. If you're just getting a new system, you may not have all of the tokens and bits and bobs, and people often replace them with other things. That will last you an age. Then we have our little leather effect A5e Moonstone Booklet. So, that is the complete rules for Moonstone in and of itself, along with some examples of melee. Now you can download these all for free from the Goblin King Games website, along with the decks of cards as well. So it's a relatively simple game. There are some, well, actually no, it is a simple game to play. However, the genius comes with the characters that you play and with the card deck. So I'm not going to go through every character. I've unboxed both the previous sets anyway of the 3 players, so you can see those for more detail. But what I will do is take out Angerboda and the Jackalope and give you a rundown of gameplay itself. So with the card deck you get 2 quick reference sheets, so you can get your turn, which is great. One for you, one for your opponent. Then there are the arcane cards and the melee cards, and these are shared decks, so you need one deck for the entire table, whether it's 2 players, 3 players or 4 players, it doesn't change. And if we were doing a combat, melee combat, which we can do first, what you would do is you take the melee value, and that's how many cards you get. You get bonuses if you were the one initiating the combat. Just going to give these a quick shuffle. And you can also spend energy to buy an extra card. So if the Jackalope, for example, initiated the combat, which would cost blue energy, so you've got 3 at the start of the game and you'd have to spend 1 to move and spend 1 to make the melee attack, and then spend another. So they would get 3 for the base melee. They would get 1 for initiating the combat and 1 for buying an extra attack. And this would be their hand. And then Angerboda might not have any energy left, but they get a defensive hand. So 3 for them. And then both players would choose a relevant attack or defense card from their hand. Now, just because the Jackalopes initiated the attack, Angerboda could actually attack back. So if we look here, she has 1 of each attack: sweeping cut, falling swing, and rising attack. So low coming up, up going down, and straight through the middle. And if we look, her signature move is on a sweeping cut. So she may want to pick this as her attack. So this would be done without your opponent knowing. And then you would reveal them at the same time. Now, the Jackalope has a rising attack as a signature move. And also, if you look here, if it deals piercing melee damage, you increase the damage dealt by +2. So, looking at theirs, they have a falling swing, a thrust, another falling swing, a high guard, and a low guard. So a bit of a mixed bag. Not the best because there's no signature move in there. But let's say they decide that they're going to go with the falling swing. It deals impact or slicing, so they would just deal their regular damage. The alternative is to go for a thrust. And again, it has a piercing damage, so this would give +2. So why would you go for this over this? Well, I'll show you. So let's say they both played those. Falling swing v falling swing. The first thing you would do is compare them. So you've got a quick reference table here. If you play this card, this is what will come back at you from your opponent. So you've played a falling swing and they've also played a falling swing. You would deal you would deal 0 damage, which is different from nil. Nil is the one above. It can never be added in any way. So both dealing no damage. However, Angerboda, if they deal impact melee damage, they increase the damage by +2. So this is impact or slicing, your choice. So you would go, okay, I'm not going to do any damage from the card, but I'm going to do +2 damage. So 2 will go through. And the only way to block these cards is to use a defensive block. So it is actually like sword fighting. In that case, the Jackalope would have made a terrible mistake, not done any damage, and there's nothing to be said. They would lose 2 health off this list, which you just put in either a sleeve and then mark them off with a dry wipe, or you can mark them some other way with tokens. If the bunny had actually gone with their piercing attack instead, their thrust, so this time round you compare them, and the high guard, the falling swing against the thrust deals no damage again, but Angerboda will get +2, so 2 damage still. But here, the thrust against the falling swing will deal 2 damage, and then you add +2 for the piercing, so that's 4 against 2. So they would both take the damage. Jackalope would take 2, not too bad. Angerboda would take 4, bit of a cutting. So that's how melee works. And with this deck, there are 3 of each card. So if that had been going the other way, and Angerboda had been attacking, and this was the defensive hand for the bunny, for the jackalope, knowing that they've got 2 falling swings in their hand, they might go, okay, your opponent is unlikely to have the 3rd falling swing, roughly speaking. So if you've got a low guard or a high guard, and you're thinking, which one will I protect myself with? Well, the falling swing is blocked by a high guard, so probably don't need that one. In this case, they would have been wrong, but you know. So you'd either go for a counter-attack of your own or try and block with a low guard. And if you pick the perfect counter to an attack, so if your opponent plays the falling swing and you play the high guard, you'll see this is actually marked off in yellow. They would deal nil damage, and this can't be improved on, so you wouldn't get the +2 for the impact because it's a null number, so to speak. And because it's yellow, it means you get to counter immediately with a card from your hand. So it's a perfect riposte, which is a really nice way of doing it. So they play the falling swing, you counter with a high guard, and then you could immediately get to go in there with your sweeping cut or thrust or whatever it happens to be in your hand, and your opponent can't counter that at all. So it's a really neat way of doing it. Essentially, there are a high attack, a high guard, a low attack, a low guard, and then in the middle you have a sweep and a thrust. So 2 attacks, but one kind of counters the other, depending on whether you want to do sort of slicing or impact damage. And sometimes you'll not have any cards that you want to use, so you'll just get a bad draw, and you'll end up going full Inigo Montoya. You may want to try and kill Wesley, even though you're using your left hand, but it's not going to happen. So that's melee, and it's something similar for Arcane, and Arcane covers spells, ranged effects like crossbows or guns, that sort of thing. And they're generally listed on the card, so it will tell you what it is, what energy is required to cast it or use it. So in this case, Eternal Chill would cost 2 energy, which would be all of Angerboda's energy for the turn, and they need a blue card of any value to do it. They start with 4 Arcane. So if I go shuffle these up again, and let's say 2, 3, and 4, shuffled enough, you look at your opponent's evade stat, and that's how many cards you take away from your Arcane or add to your Arcane. So if you've got something very fat and slow moving, like a jackalope, you get 1 more. If that had a minus, you would actually take 1 away. So instead of having 4, you would have 3 or maybe 2. So you do that, and then your opponent gets 3 cards as a resist hand. And the 3 is set unless something is countering it or changing it. And here, Angerboda would look at this and go, oh, that is the worst possible hand I could have. No blues, because there are only greens, pinks, and blues in the deck. And then there are also catastrophe cards. Now, if you look at this, it tells you that the target suffers X magical damage and gains slow until the end of the turn. And on a catastrophe, the character restores 1 wound and the target restores 2 wounds. So even if you mess up, you can get a wound back, but your target will also gain wounds back. If I look at the bunny resist hand, Jackalope has a pink 2, a green 2, and a pink 1, so nobody has any blues. They've drawn these cards first, and they decide what they're going to do. So what they could actually do is say, I've got a blue 3, and then you have to work out whether or not your opponent is bluffing. And from your hand, you've got no blue cards at all. It's very likely that they maybe have got the blue 3, especially if you've got an honest opponent. So you can say, yes, that's fine. And then the spell goes off or the attack goes off and that card just goes away and you never reveal it. If your opponent, on the other hand, goes, I think you're lying. There's only three cards in the deck, 1 blue, 1 pink and 1 green. I don't think you've got the blue 3. I'm going to call your bluff, and you reveal it. Then your opponent gets to replace the card you've played. So your blue 3, which was actually a green 1, can be replaced with any other card, which means you can stop it from going off. In this case, it's not going to go off anyway, but you could go, I'm going to replace it with that for some reason, or not at all. You just leave it as is. However, if you'd happen to pick up any of the 3 catastrophes in the deck and you replace it with that, then the catastrophe effect comes in, and that can be very, very bad indeed. The fact that Angerboder had all 3 in her hand means that she could bluff with impunity because you know your opponent can't hurt you with a catastrophe card. However, most of the time you're not going to see those in your hand, and therefore you should be afraid, be very afraid. So those are how the game is played, all with cards. Your character cards tell you what they have, the melee cards, so melee, arcane cards do everything else. So why do we have dice? I'm glad you asked. First off, D6. 1 for you, 1 for your opponent. They are rolled at the start of a turn to see who's got the initiative. They've got the initiative. They do not. That is the only thing D6 are used for and can be immediately thrown away. The D4, the Wargamer Caltrop, are actually your objective markers for the game. These represent your moonstones. There are 7 of them, and you start the game by lifting your hand above the table about 45-50 centimeters up and dropping them, and wherever they land, that's where they are. Your opponent can do a mulligan on the first drop, and then after that I think you have to stay where they are. So because you're holding them very high up and you play on a small table, the moonstones appear once darkness sets in, and then they are strewn wherever, and it's a race to get them. The reason they use D4 rather than objective markers is the die itself both marks the location of the moonstone and also the depth it is at. So that is at depth of 1, which means it will take 1 action to harvest it. However, this is at a depth of 4, so 1 action to harvest it would bring it to a 3, then you'd need another action to bring it to a 2, then you would need a final action to bring it to a 1, and then it could be harvested and lifted. So low or shallow moonstones compared to deep moonstones, which is a really neat way of doing your objectives. It's random. They could end up on either side of the board. They could end up in different bits of terrain or behind terrain and at different depths. And because some will be very shallow and easy to pick up, people will go for those quickly, whereas the deeper moonstones will probably be hanging around to late game and may pass back and forth. Somebody may start digging one up only to be attacked, and then everything goes horribly wrong. Last thing are the models. So in this case we have 2 little tokens of Brave Sir Pidge, and on the back we have Frey the Bearer of Knowledge, I think. They are a new faction. That may not be his name. So these are 2 little tokens for psychopumps, which are intrinsic to how the shades play. They have their own models that you can buy. However, for game purposes, for this starter set, you've got 2 tokens instead, where the token is the size of their base. So that's quite nice. Little artwork on those. And then we have our box of resin. So these out, we have the Hunting Horn Party. There we have two one-piece. No, we don't. Toodles' arms are separate. So we have the Hoff, Jada and Mr. Toodles. So Jada is a full build. We have Mr. Toodles, who needs his foot, and the Hoff, who you do not hassle. So these are all resin. We also have the Jackalope, which, again, resin with horns. And then we have the Shades faction. So, Angabuda, the Frost Giant, which is a 4-piece build, 2 arms onto the body, body onto the legs, and off you go. And then we have the Never Ending Nights, who I have unboxed very recently. So if you want to see all of these in their constituent parts, a link to that will be lurking below. But let's zoom in and take a look at the miniatures a bit closer and assembled. Okay, so our Jackalope then. Big fat ass bunny, big chunk of resin. Easy to build and cute, with bunny legs and front hooves from some form of deer type thing. Or bunny feet. It's difficult to tell. Could go either way. He's got antlers. I'm not checking. Right. It is approximately 40mm to the top of the horns and around 25 to bunny eye level. It sits on a 40mm base. Despite being a 3-piece build, there is actually something to watch out for with the bunny. If I bring this in, so there's a nice lug there, which takes the horn easily, or the antler. This one, however, you can see there's a cut out the rear, and then also a squared hole, then mortise for the other antler. Now, what I found is, because the antler itself is rounded at the base, it fits very neatly in there. However, not easily in there because of this squared part. So if you actually trim that at an angle with a knife, or you can even cut it off altogether, then that allows you to push it in and then sort of set it forward. If you're worried about breaking it, resin's relatively robust, but there's always the possibility that you might have a mischief and cause yourself issues. Really simple. Hot water, not boiling, just hot. Put this in for a minute or so, it will get very rubbery. Then you can trim it, put the glue on, trim it, dry it, put the glue on this, push it into place while it's still rubbery. After it cools, it will go harder and brittler again. But yeah, it's a nice miniature. Everybody loves the Angry Bunny. For the rest of the hunting party, we have the Hoff. Like I say, that 1-piece character. Just a big angry fawn. He is around 32mm to eye level, and about 42 to the top of his horn. He's got his woodsman's axe. Really good character for fawns and soldiers because he gives them buffs. He's also absolutely brutal, especially if he gets a charge into melee. He gets big benefits for that. We have Mr. Toodles, the little support character fawn, dancing away, doing a jig like the last Boy Scout. Again, another easy build because those arms are just keyed into either side of his little vest. Smallest of the Fauns, just 28mm to eye level, but a lot of character in him as well. Really good support character for buffing other people, especially somebody like Jada, which is the most involved build here. Gorgeous work on the bow, where it's that sort of living wood. Just needs the little string attached. If you're going to do that, use wire, not string, because string's too thick at this scale. Beautiful figure running away, which is what she does. Shoot, run, until your opponent hates you forever, and then they're dead. So again, another one where the arms, this arm, and then the hand for the bow, along with the arrow itself, are attached. But really fine work on the fletching, that sort of thing. She is around 30mm to eye level. Yes. So that's the La Chevalte side of things. For the shades, we have the massive ice giant, who can also be fielded for the Commonwealth, actually, as part of a Norse force, if you want. I say that. She doesn't have to be with any other Norse, but she's going to get benefits if there are Norse around, or soldiers, because she counts as a soldier. So Eric, the squire, things like that will buff her. Easy build, beautiful figure, really nice texture on the leather of her cloak. It's an absolutely biffing model. Huge, around 45mm to eye level and 50 to her crown of her head. Sitting on that big base, dragging that massive axe behind her. Then we have everybody's favourite cleric, Grey Mare. So this is a support character. Just the sword and arm is separate. Apart from that, it's all one piece. Little psychopomp on his shoulder, giving him the good news. Donkey's head replacing his own. Unfortunately, when raised from the dead, his own head was no longer present. So has to replace it on occasion. Donkey is around 32mm to eye level, 40 to the top of his big ass ears. Big ass. Then we have Negroli, who's a nobleman soldier wearing a fine suit of full plate, carrying a sword, again another one-piece model. So more building required with the La Chevalte than the shades, but not egregiously so. And finally we have Sherif, so a soldier with pavés and a crossbow and a lot of time on his hands waiting for you to get into position. I like the fact that both factions have a dedicated shooter. It'll be interesting to see how they play out. So they've gone with sort of matching figures, not entirely, but both factions, Shade and La Chevalte, have a ranged character. They both have a hard-hitting melee soldier type. Both have a support. And finally, they both have a, what I would call a centerpiece model in other games, but in the wonderful world of the multi-award winning Moonstone, they are just two more characters. Just happen to be a bit bigger, a ton of health, and good damage takers as well as dealers. So sort of tanks, if you want to think of them that way. You have tank, you have some range DPS, melee DPS, and healer for both factions. So yeah, terrific starter set. Really nice to see the new factions in there. All right, there we go. Lovely starter set, as always, from Goblin King Games. Their miniatures are sublime, and changing it up, having the shades pair off against what is essentially their antithesis with the life-giving La Chevalte in there is a great idea, I think, from everyone at Goblin King. 4-side, your standard troop box backed up by one of the big models is a nice change as well. The first starter set, which has ran for years, was 4 infantry type models, shall we say. It's not quite as simple as that with the multi-award winning Moonstone, because everyone's a character, everyone can do the mission. 6 goblins could equally take on 6 trolls or giants and have a good time doing it. So it's a very well balanced game, and hopefully this introduces a whole new slew of people to Tauber and what goes on in there. If you're not already involved with it, you can check out the Let's Plays on the channel, but let me know what you think below of the new starter set. Until next time, bye-bye.
Go ahead and check out our other content on screen now. And while you're at it, why not hit subscribe and remember to ding our dong. Go on, you know you want to click it. Go on.